Well, I started sailing when I was that high, and I joined the Sea Scouts. Now, you know what the Scouts and Guides are, right? Well, I joined the Sea Scouts at about the age of 9, and then at 12 years of age, I joined the Navy, Royal New Zealand Navy Volunteer Reserve. In New Zealand, at that time, there was compulsory military service. So before a boy, didn't apply to girls, could graduate from high school, they had to have done about 6 months in the military. And if they took scholarships through university, they had to have done another 6 months with the military. So that was part of our training as youngsters now. So I was doing all this with the Navy. And years later, I never completed it, by the way, because they abandoned the system before I had done my full year. No longer do we have compulsory military training. I then was in the Merchant Marine for a brief time. I was traveling to England to do my graduate studies, and I arrived at the ship the day before, 2 days before it was due to sail. It was a passenger ship. In those days, you didn't fly anywhere. From New Zealand to England, there were no planes in 1959. You went on a ship. There were no cruise ships back in those days. Nobody went cruising. They were called passenger ships, passenger liners, because that's what it was for, to transport people. And I managed to get a job on the boat. By going early, I managed to get the job of operating the elevator. It had a little handle. That would take it up and that would take it down. And there were 6 decks on this boat called the Dominion Monarch. And my best story there is that the second day out, one of the officers comes to me and says, "It's going to be a rough night tonight. There's a storm." I don't know, good. He said, "The elevator might jam." I said, it might what? He said, "It might get stuck." I said, "What do I do then?" He said, "You say, 2nd time today." That'll make everyone feel better. So I'm on this elevator. It's crowded with about 9 people, and damn it, the boat comes off a wave and it twists and we jam, and I go, "10th time today." And everyone's happy, talking to one another. I'm scared as hell, I'm working this handle. And then suddenly it comes off another wave, freeze up, and I get them all out safely. So then I went back home to New Zealand and came to America, and about, I guess 25, 30 years ago now, I bought a boat and began to live on it in Boston Harbor. And I lived in Boston Harbor for two years, 1983, on board the boat with my wife, or my girlfriend then, wife now. And we sailed down the East Coast looking for a place to live, because my 2 boys were living in New York, north of the city, a place called Pleasantville. Who's from New York again? Pleasantville, New York.
Pleasantville?
Yeah. And so I wanted to be on the East Coast so I could see them on weekends and that. And we sailed down the East Coast, the Chesapeake Bay, and I found that the bay is too shallow for my yacht. I like big yachts. I like to go out to sea. I mean, I sailed to England, and when I swam the English Channel the first time, I was alongside my own boat. My wife and I sailed over, and we used my boat to swim the channel. So, and we sailed back to Boston. So now we're coming down. Chesapeake's too shallow and too hot in the summer. Annapolis, Washington, D.C., too sticky. Then I got to Charleston, South Carolina. Nobody from Charleston here, right? No. And I found that, you know, to be accepted in Charleston, you have to have lived there for 3 generations. And I only had 1 generation. There was a street with some lovely houses on it, and I said, "Oh, I like that street," I said to the real estate agent. And she said, "Oh, you can't live there." I said, "Why not?" And she said, "Well, that's for old Charleston people, families." She wasn't meaning old in terms of being 70, 78. She was meaning old in that they had a history that was a very snobbish area. So with that in mind, I didn't want to stay in that area. But we were getting desperate now because there's only St. Augustine left, Fort Lauderdale and Miami, and I don't care for the big cities. And Fort Lauderdale might have been possible. So we were fortunate enough that we sailed into St. Augustine as the sun was setting. It was setting just over Flagler College and the Lightner and all of that. And immediately my wife saw that and she says, "Oh, we can live here." And I said, "Good." And so we lived at the Conch House Marina for a while, and then we bought an apartment there and other things. And then eventually, of course, I had lived in Atlanta, Georgia for a while, and that's where I started my university. It was called an institute there. And so I moved it down here, and in 1992 it became a university. Now it's the largest physical therapy school and occupational therapy school in the country. It has a campus here in St. Augustine by Flagler Hospital. It's got a campus in Austin, Texas, and another one out in San Diego, California. So we've got three campuses. And I owned, this is America. I owned the university myself, totally. You can't do that in New Zealand. You can't start a university. They're all run by the state. But in America here, it's a country where, you know, if you can do a good job, and we're licensing commissions and accrediting bodies, and I was able to start a university. I mean, Harvard had to start by somebody. I guess his name was Harvard, right?
It was John Harvard.
That's right. And there's a number that carry people's names. But the name Paris is not good for a university. Because Paris University.
Confusing. Where is that? Where is that?
Yeah, well, it's very confusing. So we were going to call it Matanzas University. But we found out the word Matanzas meant river of blood. So that wasn't too good an idea. So we finished up with University of St. Augustine. And it started out Institute of Physical Therapy, but we added other programs. So health sciences, we came down here as that. And the laws governing higher education vary from state to state. This is one country, I know, but it's 50 states. That's both a strength and a weakness. And you can probably be aware of that in a number of areas. But for me, it was a strength in that in Massachusetts, I could never have started a university. They needed $5 million. This is back in the 1960s. They needed $5 million in a bank account before you did anything. And I said, if I had $5 million, I'd be retiring. In Georgia, they didn't ask for $5 million. They just wanted to see a good program and have it looked at by your peers. In other words, other educators, other physical therapists. And they all said it was a good program, so I got a license. Now, that's not accreditation. Accreditation comes later, years later, when you prove to the community of your peers and to educational organizations and to the Department of Education that you're worthy of accreditation. Then your degree has some meaning. So you need to be careful when you take a degree that the organization is not only licensed, but that it's accredited by a respectable body. And that takes time. It took us about 5 years to get accredited, our first accreditation. So that's just hard work. Well, back to the sailing. Sailboats has been my interest for many years. But when I started the university here, I had to buy a hospital. It was the psychiatric hospital at the back of Flagler. Sometimes I still think it's the psychiatric hospital. Anyhow, and that took a lot of money. So I had to sell all my assets pretty well. I had lots of property and houses in town and the boat. I had to sell it all to get the money to buy the hospital, to hire the faculty, to do everything, to borrow money from the bank and so on, because it costs a lot of money to start a big business, and it is a big business. And so I didn't have a boat. And then when I got back into boating, I got a small power boat, and that didn't satisfy me at all. Not interested in really enjoying power boats. So I got back into sailing again, and decided that the boat I would get would be one that I could sail around the world, would be big enough for that, and I did. So between 1998 and 2005, I sailed around the world. This is not on the boat I have now, this is my previous big boat. It was built in Sweden, near Gothenburg, and I sailed to England through a canal in the north of England, sailed down to the United States, and then my country won the America's Cup, the sailing cup. So I went through the Panama Canal all the way to New Zealand to watch us keep the cup. We won it again. All right, so what do I do then? Because I had 2 years now before the next America's Cup competition. So I sailed from New Zealand up to Alaska. Thank you.
Yes.
I sailed up through all these islands up here to Alaska, and then came back down again in time for this. Now, I was only sailing a month or two a year, all right? So I wasn't sailing all the time. I had a job here. I'm the sort of person who would be at the office by 8 o'clock in the morning, all right? And I would work in the office at the university till 6 at least, and sometimes I'd be teaching in the evenings. And on weekends, I often taught seminars. So I figured that by the end of September, I had already worked a full year. Because if you think of 40 hours a week, for 50 weeks, that's 2,000 hours, all right? But I'd done that by the end of September, so October, November, December were mine. So I got sailing. Not necessarily those months, that could be pretty bad weather. I'd sail like 2 months a year anyhow in there. And so after that, we lost the cup. So I then sailed away around south of Australia, stopping at various places, to South Africa, and then on up back home to here. And then I sold that boat, because by that time, it was getting a bit worn out and taking too much time to look after it, and I didn't have that time. And then in 2002, my oldest son, Alan, he decides he's going to sail around the world in a race. And there are about 14 boats in this event. It's called the Around Alone. They held it every 4 years. They don't do it any longer now.
Say that again, around alone.
Around Alone,
So
yeah.
by just one person in the boat.
Yeah, solo. But he had 5 stops, okay? And he completed the trip. I think 2 of the boats did not, because boats do break out. They sink or they lose their mast, and so on. I'll get to that in a moment. So I met him at a couple of points on the way to help him with his boat, because he had a slow boat. It was not very fast compared with the others. And so when he would arrive in Cape Town, South Africa, he'd get there just about, that's where one of 5 stops. Cape Town was one of them. He'd get there only 2 or 3 days before the whole thing was due to start again. Others had been there for 2 weeks or so. So I would arrive and help him get his boat ready so he could have some time with his wife and kid. And then off he would go. So I met him there. I met him in New Zealand as well. So I thought, well, you know, this seems like a lot of fun. If this kid of mine can do it, I can do it. But I'll have to do one better than him. I won't stop at all. So I started reading about it, and I got inspired by people who have done this. Only about 105 people have sailed around the world nonstop. So I thought I'd like to be one of them, and in the process, I would be the oldest by a number of years, by about 25 years. But just last year, a lady, age 70, did it. So I'll only be the oldest by 7 years should I succeed, and I will be trying again. So I got this boat, as you know, and it's a great boat, but it has some problems, as you know. And but we didn't know it had these problems because we tested it quite a bit. I took part in a couple of races. There was the first race I did. The boat was designed in Annapolis, Maryland. It was built up here in Maine, in Thomaston, Maine, somewhere near where Barbara lives. And I went in a race from Newport, Rhode Island to Bermuda, solo. 24 of us started, only 18 finished. So they had a broken boom, a broken mast, and one boat sunk. And they did a rescue, and one of the other boats in the group rescued him, got that sailor, but the boat then went down some hours later. And then on the way back, the race was called the Bermuda 1-2, so it's one person sailing down. On the way back, you're allowed to have somebody else with you. And I had my son with me, the one who sailed around the world. So that was a great trip. And then I sailed down to here and back again, and the boat was doing fine. So we're ready. The record around the world is from Bermuda. And the route, you don't stop anywhere. It's simply, as you can imagine, down south like this, around the bottom here, all the way around the bottom, back up around here again, of course, back to Bermuda. The man who set the record actually started out in Maine, but his boat broke down in the sense that his autopilots were not strong enough, so he restarted from there. The previous record holders were from England and France. And so if you look at the distance, his distance, they all come down through here, you see? His distance to about here is that distance. It's a wee bit further from France and England. So there was some question about whether that was legitimate. Because he's breaking a record that was set from these countries, and he's not going quite as far. But he broke it by something like, he did it in 150 days, breaking it by 58 days. So he clearly could have started from here and broke it. So they gave it to him. I thought if I started from St. Augustine, I would make it much more equivalent to add that to here, take the line up to there, as starting from here. So that's one of the reasons I'm starting from St. Augustine. The other reason I'm starting from St. Augustine is that it's publicity for the city. And it's our 450th. We seem to be celebrating it forever, though, but still.
It never comes, right?
I think it's next year, actually. I mean, well, if you think it's fun, go lock yourself away for a minute. Go rent a place up in Maine and just stay there by yourself for a month. Well, try 150 days. It's not easy. It's not easy not to have contact. Well, my happiest moment of the whole trip was seeing my wife jumping up and down on the dock and get down. She was excited to see me. So no, I found it difficult to be by myself. But having found it difficult, I know I can do 150 days, but it will be difficult. But I'm also going to make sure that I have better food on board. I mean, I had chicken and steak and stuff like that, but I didn't have any spices or things, and so it just tasted the same damn thing every day, you know. So I will take a more variety of nuts, and I had lots of nuts. Took my favorite nuts, but I better take other nuts as well, because you need variety. Because on a boat, food becomes a big object. I mean, food and entertainment, like listening to music. And I got tired of my music, hearing it every day. I need more variety of music, more variety of food, because those are the things that sort of sustain you, because there's not much else. You can read. You're not sailing all the time. You need to pay attention all the time. It's like driving a car. You can have time for other thoughts when you're on the highway, even though you're driving all the time. You have time for other thoughts. And sailing is very much like that. After a while, you can relax.
Can I just ask, so how do you sleep 8 hours a night, or
No.
No.
Well, if you went to sleep for 8 hours, all sorts of things could happen.
Right.
Firstly, the wind will probably not be coming from the same direction. So you set your boat sail, say the wind's coming this way, right? And I'm sailing this way. Well, I can trim the sails to do that. But so now the boat is sailing like that. And I'm going, that's where I want to go. If the wind turns to there, now I'm sailing this way. I'm going over that way now. And for 8 hours I'm going in the wrong direction. Because you want to keep the boat trimmed to the wind. So as the wind changes, so will you. All right? If you put the boat on a magnetic heading and the wind changed, well, now it would stop sailing. The sails would flog and you stop sailing. So you need to pay attention at least every hour and a half. I slept mainly 45 minutes at a time. And when I got out of the shipping lanes where there was no traffic, then I'll sleep an hour and a half. But I didn't. I only slept about a half, 45 minutes or an hour. But I'll try it a little differently next time. I can sleep as many times as I like during, for 45 minutes at a time. But the thing is, because you're not getting a full 7 or 8 hours sleep, you do get fatigued. It wouldn't matter if I slept a total of 12 hours a day. It still would leave me fatigued. And I would say now I've been back for just over a month now. It took me a good 3 weeks before I felt rested, back to myself. I was, not that I was tired, I just was not feeling well. Like getting off an airplane, you know how you feel? You're not 100% for a day? I felt the same way, long trip. Felt like that, but I mean, I had several 12-hour sleeps. Oh gosh, was that good. And on a bed too. Because I slept in the cockpit on thin cushions like that. So when the boat started having problems, I only slept 2 nights below. I wanted to be where the action was if anything happened, any more squalls came by.
Is there a physical effect that 150 days of that kind of sleeping would do that's a lot worse than 50 days?
I guess so. I think my physical condition will run down. As you know, I'm an athlete, and I've trained for marathons and swimming the channel and triathlons. And one thing I had learned about that is that when you finish the event and it's all over, if you don't keep running and staying fit, you feel very ill. Your body needs all this exercise. You become sort of a junkie, somewhat addicted to running. Runners will tell you, I have to go for a run, I have to go for a run. Because they need to get that back in their body again. Well, if I trained heavily prior to setting out on the boat, I felt I would have that same negative post-training effect. Because there's no way you can get a lot of physical exercise on the boat. I mean, I can only walk 50 feet, and I got to hang on all the time too. So you can't swing your arms and go for a run anywhere. But, so I think in some ways I was undertrained for this event. I'm strong enough up here, but I'll try and do a wee bit more aerobically as well as body strength. I have to be strong to pull ropes and work winches. And for my age, I think I'm okay, but I will do a wee bit more physical training. And that swimming in the English Channel and a relay, the training for that will probably be sufficient. I don't want to be super fit. That would be wrong. It would be biochemically, physiologically wrong. But I think I was undertrained. Finding the right balance for yourself is important. That's what experience is all about.
Will the wine cellar survive the retrofitting?
The wine cellar. I carefully measured out enough for 2 drinks a day for 120 days, not 150.
Oh, that's
120, that was my incentive to go faster. And I was very good. I was conforming to it because I didn't want to finish up, in a drought. So the good news was when the boat finally broke down, I had an oversupply. And I was so depressed really for a day, knowing that it was all over and that I cut the seals to the engine, turned the engine on. I knew it was all over then, and I was going to Cape Town, still 5-6 days away, and there was bad weather in the forecast, but not for another day. So rather than just having 2 drinks, I had 2 more. And I really felt, because I hadn't been drinking much, I felt quite lightheaded, and I thought, can't do this again. So I behaved myself from then on again. But there was that one night where I treated my depression. That's a dangerous thing to get into, as you know. So yeah, I actually had wine, but wine, unfortunately, as you know, if you have a bottle of wine, 2 of you can easily finish that in an evening, right? Now, but if you have a bottle of single malt scotch, there's no way 2 of you can finish that in an evening. I would hope not, anyway. So that's a better investment in terms of weight on the boat. And with the weight is a very important consideration. So I didn't have much wine. I had mainly single malt and rum. Yeah.
I think some of these people
Yeah.
have questions for you.
Sure. I'd like to have it.
I wrote a question, but they answered.
Oh, you answered them all.
What's the question then?
Yeah, well, one-
Why did you want to make this journey? You answered.
Well, I can answer it in a different way. I've liked challenges all my life.
Yeah.
Whether it's in business or my profession or in sports. I think I've only got one life on this planet. I'm scared about what happens next. But I've got one life on this planet. And I don't mind working hard at my work or running hard or things of that nature. I get more out of life, the more I put into it. And so I've taken on challenges like the channel and so on. And this to me was a challenge. Most people at my age have sort of given up. Many people, I should say, at my age have given up. They've got their children, now they've got their grandchildren. And they're quite happy to sit back in retirement and enjoy that part of their life, enjoy their grandchildren. I think that's fine. But for me, I've got grandchildren. I just want to keep living the way I've always lived. And my wife is very supportive of that. You might know Al Gore. Al Gore ran for President of the United States against George Bush Jr. and lost. Very close election, you remember, here in Florida. It was decided, was it not? On the Chads or whatever. Yeah. Well, he has been in the political life all his life. And his wife, Tipper, has been very supportive. As you know, if you're running for president, you kind of need a partner who's supportive, all right? And she was very supportive. But when it was all over, politics for him, he became this person very interested in global warming and green and all of those things. And he's one of these people who's led our awareness of the possibilities of there being problems in terms of global warming. So his career continues. But his wife, Tipper, I think Tipper, she wanted to have more time with the grandchildren and wanted to get off this roller coaster that he was on. So they're now divorced. And that's a tragedy, but it speaks to what can happen in life. She's doing the more natural thing at her time in life, grandchildren. He is doing his thing. And so they're parted on good terms, but it can happen. You know, so those things do happen. And my wife is very supportive of me. When she knew I was going to stop, I had to abandon it. She said, well, you can fix it up and start again and take it. Maybe there's something I don't know.